boasts one of the driest deserts in the world. Stretched out in a narrow strip, the whole length of its 1,500-mile-long coast. It's a place of stark, inhospitable beauty. A barren land which contrasts sharply with the richness of the ocean waters pounding its shore. Here the frigid, nutrient-rich Humboldt Current, flowing up from Antarctica, meets the warm waters of the tropics. The result is an explosion of plankton and a flowering of marine life. For 35 years, Dos Winkel has been driven by a passion to photograph wildlife and local cultures. On this assignment, he's looking to capture the hidden beauty of Peru's contrasting water worlds. From its fragile, threatened desert coast to the mysterious and majestic Lake Titicaca.
This is incredibly beautiful, eh?
Lying in thin air nearly 12,500 feet above sea level, Lake Titicaca is the legendary birthplace of the mighty Inca. Here, on an expedition to dive its ice-cold waters, Dos goes in search of a unique creature, the sacred frog of Titicaca. The starting point for this journey of dramatic contrasts is Peru's capital, Lima, which for 3/4 of the year lies shrouded in a grey sea mist.
We are battling the chaotic Lima traffic. Ahead of us is a 3-day road trip.
Dos's companion and guide is biologist Stefan Austermüller. As director of the conservation group Mondo Azul, he's campaigning for better protection of Peru's coastal ecosystems. Their destination is one of the most remote and unspoilt coastal regions in the country, the enigmatic Paracas Peninsula. It's a fragile paradise, where life has found ways to survive on less than half a cup of water a year. But remote as it is, this paradise is coming increasingly under pressure from human development, both planned and unplanned, spreading along the coast. Chiclayo, a dusty, wind-blown town on Peru's north coast. It's a major commercial center, the base for a busy fishing fleet. For Dos and Stefan, it also means the end of the tarmac.
After a very long drive up from Lima, we've now left the road and we're on the beach. And we have to stay on the beach because this is the only way to reach the area that we want to visit. There are no other roads.
The race is on. With the tide coming in, they have 5 hours to get up the beach, with the driver doing his best to keep the vehicle moving on the soft, wet sand.
Stefan Austermüller is especially concerned about this area because there is a lot of illegal dolphin slaughter and also turtle slaughter. So we have to scan the beach for dead animals and have to examine them and see what happened to them. This looks like a dolphin.
What's this? Well, this is a porpoise. You can see the low front and the typical fin of a porpoise. In the 90s, we had some 10 to 15,000 dolphins slaughtered on the beaches here. That's incredible. So that's a lot.
At first I thought that these animals really died of a natural cause because you couldn't see anything. The most likely cause is that they have been strangled or died in the nets of the fishermen here. These animals have to come to the surface to breathe. They're mammals.
It's a sad story, huh?
The killing of dolphins and other small whales and the sale of their meat has been illegal in Peru since 1990. But that doesn't stop around 50 of them being killed each day. While public campaigns against this slaughter have meant that dolphin meat is no longer openly sold in supermarkets, these beautiful creatures continue to die, often through drowning after getting tangled in fishing nets.
Our driver is not so happy with the fact that we want to stop because it's difficult in the wet and soft sand to restart after stopping.
Esa subida, mira, no es normal.
But this stretch of coast is a death trap to more than just small whales. Hundreds of turtles also get caught in the carnage.
The turtles that we find here are clearly too young to die. We find different species and they're all juveniles. The only sign of human settlement is this very small fishing village, but for me it's really disgusting. There are hundreds and hundreds of decapitated stingrays on the beach and they leave everything on the beach, these people. Such beautiful animals and they use such a small part of it. Stefan wants to see if there are any signs of dolphins or turtles, but we don't see any. What we do see is that the nets they're fishing with are way too fine. They're catching all the juvenile fish, and this is probably why the fish population is decreasing so rapidly here.
The job of stopping to record and photograph each dolphin and turtle found on the beach is slowing down progress. With only an hour or so to go before high tide, and the light already beginning to fail, a sense of urgency takes hold.
I expected extremely dry, hot weather, and what we have here is fog. Cold winds, and we had even some rain, and the weather hasn't changed. And you know, me as a simple Bonairean, I'm freezing to death.
Really?
I'm so cold. I have to say that for me this was a very strange day. I've never ever seen so many dead animals and so many different species. So many different types of dolphins and different species of turtles and all these bones and vertebrae. It's really incredible. Now we just got up. It's still very, very early. It's cold, it's windy. When you look at this desert landscape, it looks empty. But when you take a closer look, it's full of life. there are flowers, there are insects, there are bigger animals. In fact, it's a very fragile world. The balance is very delicate. The slightest disturbance can be disastrous.
The desert fox used to be common all along the coast. But today, for the timid fox and a whole range of desert plants beautifully adapted to these harsh conditions, Biovar offers a final refuge. Together with other local and national conservation groups, Stefan's main goal is to turn this rugged place into a national park. As part of a detailed submission to the central government, he's carrying on an ongoing survey of each major ecological zone. The strip of beach covered and uncovered twice a day by the tide is one of the richest habitats in Biovar. Here the rock crab and its many cousins jostles for attention with other intertidal dwellers, like these gooseneck barnacles.
What a magnificent place. There are lots and lots of sea lions. This is the South American sea lion, and there are only males. All the females and the cubs are on offshore islands. They only come to the coast when it's breeding season. The longer I'm here, the more I appreciate this wonderful area, and the better I understand that Stefan wants to protect this area for the future and also for future generations.
That evening, Dos is surprised to find that the gooseneck barnacles he'd been photographing earlier are on the dinner menu. What, for most people, is just a nuisance to be scraped off the bottom of boats, is regarded here as a great delicacy. Be that as it may, Dos has no intention of breaking his vegetarian habit to find out why. The next morning is colder than usual, and the car won't start. Fortunately, the cook has a solution. Later that day, the team get a final grisly reminder of the ongoing threats facing this fragile paradise.
It looked like it was attacked by a shark, but then when I come closer, I can clearly see the tongue out of his mouth. So it must have died in a net, because when the tongue comes out, it indicates that it has been strangled and died by suffocation.
To better understand the range of problems facing Peru's long coast, Stefan invites Dos to join him on a survey he's making 800 miles down south, in Peru's only marine park, which in contrast to pristine Biovar, has lived with the impact of humans for centuries.
Peru keeps amazing me. The journey to this place was full of contrast, and it threw up some surreal moments. The town of Ica is famous for its huge sand dunes and, surprisingly, believe it or not, a wine that has been produced here since Spanish times. But for me, the most impressive is this raw desert landscape. I love it. It's hard to believe that the ocean is just an hour's drive away.
The team is heading for the Ballestas Islands, 150 miles south of Lima, in the National Marine Reserve of Paracas. Seabirds, and more particularly their waste droppings, called guano, have shaped the history of this place for hundreds of years. Since pre-Inca times, people have come out to these islands to collect guano and use it as a natural fertilizer. Over the course of thousands of years, these birds have built up deposits to depths of 150 feet. By the late 19th century, a major trade in this white gold had been established with Europe and North America, making it one of the most highly prized natural resources in the world and bringing huge wealth to the country. But when a way was found to produce nitrogen fertilizers artificially, the trade in guano collapsed, and the people here were left with only one source of income: fishing.
This is a guano island, and we're going to dive today in a guano ship, which is here on the seafloor.
I am happiest when I can dive. And this is the wreck of a guano boat that sunk over 100 years ago. It's beautifully overgrown with anemones and sea urchins and giant barnacles, and it's become an artificial reef.
Since the end of the guano boom, these waters have been under relentless pressure from fishing. Every living thing is a candidate for the pot, and these days, almost all of it is undersized.
The bounty of the sea never fails to amaze me, but it's clear that here it has been strained to the limit. It's a staggering amount of empty shells. But unfortunately, for most fishermen, it's no big deal that these shells are smaller than the allowed size.
Overfishing has now reached such levels that the population of marine mammals, like sea lions, are being seriously affected.
I love to dive with these graceful animals. The only important thing, though, is not to provoke the males, because they are very territorial, and especially during the breeding season, they can even attack you and chase you away.
Great. But I'm cold.
Man evolves on Earth, and in order to develop, he has to be near the sea, because that's the source of all riches.
This man, El Gato, is a local fisherman who has some unique ideas to tackle the problems here. He's worried about the future.
Given the bad management of the resource, we're going through a very critical phase. There's a clear task to be completed, something that we have to make other fishermen understand. If they don't organize themselves and handle the resource, there'll be no future.
Everything looks so peaceful here on the beach of Paracas Bay, but in fact every day millions of liters of untreated wastewater and pool water are released into the sea. And of course, this causes terrible problems for the wildlife.
And we're right now here in Paracas. You see there on the other side, the problem is that from Pisco, from San Andres, from the fishmeal industry, and even from these rich houses here, from these weekend houses, all the wastewater goes into the ocean without any treatment. But it's already very strong damaged by human activities. There's an illegal fishing village.
How is that possible inside the park?
Well, it's like people settle there and then they are there and you have the problem, so you have to deal somehow with that problem. But it's already very damaged here and it has to be recuperated.
Right.
They're heading south on the Paracas Peninsula. Stefan is keen to show Dos the place where he's done most of his underwater research into the biodiversity of the area.
This lives up to everything Stefan had said.
This is the place where you've been diving a lot?
Right, we have done a research here on biodiversity. We have made a three-dimensional mapping. We have localized the habitats. We found in this bay, which is only covering 0.003% of the whole marine surface of the areas, we found 30 species, which might be also new species to science. So this shows that this tiny little bay is a hotspot of biodiversity.
Absolutely.
Which definitely should be protected in future in a better way.
Dos joins Stefan in this marine wonder world on a survey dive to check current conditions.
I'm happy to find these colorful shrimp. Usually, it's difficult to approach shrimp during the day, but these animals let me get right up to them. Now I'm beginning to understand Stefan's and Elgato's concerns for this pristine area. Today, we join Elgato on a fishing trip. This man intrigues me. I wonder if this friendly fisherman will really be able to make the change among his fellow fishermen. I hope to find out more about him.
On a spot with giant kelp, this diver will collect shells for consumption. Although the sea is calm, Elgato warns the team that there may be a heavy current near the bottom, and that the deeper they go, the worse the visibility will be. Elgato's diver will dive the old-fashioned way. He'll breathe air through a hosepipe that's connected to a compressor that's over 50 years old. Elgato was right. 10 meters down, the current is vicious. For Dos, it makes taking pictures impossible. For the shell collector, it's all in a day's work.
This is incredible. This guy is working there in the most dangerous conditions you can imagine. There is a surge and a current and it smashes you from one side to the other on the rocks full of sea urchins and sharp barnacles, and he's collecting his shells there. Incredible.
The diver continues his battle with the swirling current for over an hour, picking off every shell he can find within a 10-meter radius of the boat. Elgato is horribly aware of how devastating this practice is in the long term. For the future, it is our dream to develop a small enterprise in order to supply jobs for our own family.
Elgato tells us about his ideas to change the way of clam collecting by farming clams. He already started a clam farm, where he grows these shells in big bags that are fixed to ropes.
It's still early days. While the initial results look encouraging, he will have to improve his technique significantly if his clam farm is to provide him and his family with a real income. However, by taking the initiative to look for a sustainable alternative, Elgato is offering his community an option for the future.
My time in Paracas has really got me thinking. What's happening here is something that's repeating itself in countless coastal communities around the world. We have to rethink our relationship to the sea and the creatures that live in it.
Picture, Federico, picture.
Another way to create income is through ecotourism. Although the guide's acts could use a little refining.
Modela. Anchovies, yeah, after the 1 minute, guano. Anchovies, guano.
The problems facing the Paracas community are stacking up. While fish farming offers one practical alternative, proper enforcement of the marine reserve will probably have the most wide-ranging effect. Less than 0.5% of the world's oceans receive any kind of protection. But where it does exist, it has proven to have major economic benefits. Just 5 years after setting up marine reserves around the Caribbean island of Santa Lucia, fish catches have nearly doubled, showing that if properly managed, the ocean's bounty can return. Taking leave of the coast, Dos and Stefan turn inland, climbing nearly 12,500 feet to the shores of the majestic Lake Titicaca.
The alpacas and llamas quietly go about their grazing, more or less oblivious of my presence.
Three hours out and the first signs of damage from a recent earthquake becomes apparent.
Now I could use 2 pairs of eyes, because driving here is really tricky. Peru is a country where the forces of nature often dominate. I really admire the people's attitude, the way they set to clearing up the mess and get on with their lives. Arequipa is one of the cities hardest hit by this latest earthquake. This beautiful monastery was one of the many buildings to suffer damage. Although dust is one of the main enemies of camera equipment, I have to get out of the car to take some shots of these beautiful cactus flowers.
Climbing further to over 16,000 feet, Dos notices what looks like a pink streak on a small lake.
And as we approached, in the biting wind and near freezing temperature, it becomes clear that this is a huge flock of flamingos. We hope to fool the birds by adopting this crude imitation of an alpaca.
Since they feed on small crustacean, insect larvae and algae, these Chilean flamingo usually search for water where there are no fish with which to compete for food, which explains why they're here on this icy, high-altitude mountain lake.
The combination of fast-driving heavy trucks and this damaged two-lane road result in many casualties. Just one unexpected maneuver of an oncoming truck is enough. Within minutes, drivers had stopped to help us. Miraculously, we're all able to get out of the car without serious injuries. I don't know what happened to my head, but I was totally twisted with my head. I don't know, but I'm a bit dizzy. I'll tell you, boy, we have to be so lucky. Come and look with me on the other side of the road. This is the other side of the road. Look down there. That would have been our total end. Without our car, we continue by public bus. And we all felt very lucky to be alive. A feeling that's only reinforced by the driver's habit of repeatedly kissing a crucifix. I'm happy to find out that my camera equipment is still working very well. And I'm really in trouble now, because we see so many beautiful things, but we can't stop. It's under this giant statue of Manco Cápac, the mythological father of the Inca, that I get my first view of the majestic and mysterious Lago Titicaca.
At Dos's feet lies Puno, a cultural center which unites the Quechua and Aymara peoples. These two living cultures made this their home long before it became a sacred center for the Inca. In the town's center, we find evidence of the fourth major culture to influence the area. This Roman Catholic church was built by the local people for the Spanish, resulting in an interesting mixture of styles. Lake Titicaca's biggest tourist attraction are the floating islands of Los Yuros. Here the houses and boats, and even the islands themselves, are constructed from tortora reeds, which grow abundantly in the shallows of the lake. The islands were built by the Yuros people to escape suppression by the Inca.
But in order to find what we came here for, the sacred Titicaca frog, we need to find a more remote shore away from the bustle of tourism. For me, at this altitude, every movement seems to be a big effort because of the lack of oxygen. Watching these Aymara sheep herders treating their animals for skin parasites, I'm impressed with their energy in these harsh conditions. We arrive in Yanchon, where we meet Valentin and his wife. We're invited to stay with these friendly Quechua folk. Although more than ready to help, our new hosts are astonished by the amount of gear we brought. The dive gear in particular made them laugh.
Where can we buy or borrow some oxygen?
It's as if time here has stood still. Using the traditional Inca hoe, Valentin cultivates maize, potatoes, and other vegetables. The old traditions still play a vital role in daily life. Here, weaving and other handicrafts are not being done for the tourist. The patterns used are centuries old. For a society without the written word, like the Quechua, these patterns can communicate the status of the wearer or tell stories of the community.
At dinner that night, we ask Valentin what he knows about the frogs that live in the lake. He tells us that they're used as medicine, mainly for a range of mental problems.
Dos wakes early the next morning, looking to capture the ethereal magic of the lake. Over 150 miles long, and with a surface covering more than 3,000 square miles, Titicaca is in fact the remains of two giant inland seas that once covered this Andean altiplano at the end of the last ice age.
Next, we prepare for our first dive in this sacred lake. It's sacred because the Indian legend says that the sun god's children emerged from these ice-cold waters to found the Inca Empire. Later, when the Spanish came, it's said that the lake became a secret hiding place for their gold. Before entering the water, Hendrik, my dive buddy and cameraman, and me have to chew coca leaves. Valentin insists that the gods be appeased. Then we make an offering to the water, the earth and our dive equipment. Despite all the ceremony, on our first dive we find nothing. No frogs, no pictures.
Valentin is concerned. In the last 5 years, he's noticed a drastic decline in the numbers of large frogs. Local researchers point to overfishing, organic pollution, and the introduction of trout as possible causes. But recently, an alarming new threat has appeared. A growing trade in live frogs with restaurants in the major cities, where they're blended alive and served up as a medicinal drink.
Eventually, we find some small frogs with slightly different colors, markings and texture. As Valentin has said, these frogs are no bigger than 8 to 12 centimeters at the most.
Frogs at this altitude are something special. Very few amphibians have been able to adapt to the extreme conditions encountered above 10,000 feet. But Titicaca's frogs avoid the huge variations in temperatures between day and night, and the intense ultraviolet radiation coming from the sun by spending their life submerged, not even surfacing to breathe. The frog absorbs all the oxygen it needs through the skin. The bigger the frog, the bigger and more baggy the skin. Small native fish known as ispi make up a large part of their diet. But they're not that fussy, also eating snails, worms and small crustacea.
Hey, muchas gracias.
Para el frío.
Frío. Muy frío. But,
Oh, peces,
yeah.
ispe, carachi, pejerrey.
Ah, okay.
Now that Dos has seen his first frog, Valentin wants to explain to him more about how the locals view its special powers. While some communities use frog meat to cure fever and tuberculosis, others, in times of drought, use frogs in sacred ceremonies to plead with the gods for rain.
Determined to find bigger frogs, we decide to make a journey across the lake to its northern shore, to the small island of Suazi. Again, the spirits need to be appeased, but I don't think that our boatsmen tried hard enough. First, we lose our way, and then our engine gives out. All the other engines we had, they failed. The cars, the trucks, the compressor, and now we have a ship engine. That's great. We all get a bit nervous when our captain explains that the weather here can change abruptly, producing 3-meter waves, easily swallowing up boats like these.
Looking to make the most of this misfortune, Dos and Stefan decide to make a dive here and explore the reed beds.
Suddenly, I see several frogs mating. This is really great for my pictures.
Another reason for worrying about the future of the Titicaca frog is that they're not particularly fertile amphibians. While a typical frog in the jungle lowlands might lay tens of thousands of eggs per clutch, these denizens of the icy deep manage only a few hundred.
Finally, after more uncertainty, we meet a small boat that confirms we are heading in the right direction. And after a 6-hour trip across the lake, we reach Suazi.
The island of Suazi is one of 50 in Titicaca, but the only one to be privately owned. It's been under the control of the Galvez Olvera family since the late 19th century. Today, a spectacularly positioned eco-lodge greets the new arrival. Designed to minimize the impact on nature, it allows visitors to enjoy these pristine surroundings in all their glory. The day-to-day management of the island is in the hands of granddaughter Consuela, who is proud to show off her domain. These pottery remains, thought to date back to the time of the Inca, are evidence that people have lived here for centuries.
Consuela tells me of the plans she has for the island. Her dream is to return the whole thing to its natural state, so she wants to get rid of all the introduced plants and introduce plants and animals that originally lived here. Now she already has lots of endemic plants. More than 20 alpacas and 4 vicuñas. Vicuñas are very shy creatures and close to extinction in the wild.
It looks promising.
I'm so curious to see what we can find here.
Well, good luck.
The greener, the cleaner.
Consuela is so fascinated by our dive preparations that she asked me if she could have a go. It's extraordinary to think that she lives here all her life but never has put her head on the water. Then it's our turn. I can hardly believe my eyes. This looks like a prehistoric monster. He's wearing a skin that looks 3 sizes too big. This is the frog we're looking for. Outstretched, this frog measures over 30 centimeters. Although he never sees people, he's not afraid at all. On the contrary, he obviously enjoys being filmed.
But this encounter with a gentle giant would be Dos's last. Titicaca has changed its mood. The wind is building, the air temperature falling. Diving very soon will be out of the question. It's as if the lake has decided that it has given up enough of its secrets.
Muy calor, gracias. El café, ¿no?
For the past 1.5 years, I've been thinking about this. How would it be? 3,800 meters, then go underwater. Look for the frogs. That's what I'm here for. for the frogs. Then you find the frogs. They're all mating at the moment. And then I feel so privileged to take pictures of these animals in this wonderful, incredible environment. I'm very privileged. It's great.